This is great. We had a fan club.
Well, one of the greatest joys of being at the Library of Congress is working with the staff. The knowledge, I did a rough estimate recently, and the average tenure is about 25 years. So if you did that math with, and that's with all parts of the library, all types of positions, and if you take that by 3,200, that's 80,000 years of experience. So at the next budget hearing, I'm going to bring that up. That's a lot of experience.
So Thomas Jefferson, who, of course, got the library started again after the first library burned down with his book collection, said, "I cannot live without books." Are books one of your passions, and how did you start? What got you really into reading?
Well, I was fortunate that I had grandparents, and especially a grandmother, that read to me in the summers when I would visit to Springfield, Illinois, and that's where I would go in the summers. And then I had parents who were musicians, and down in Florida, Tallahassee, Florida, Florida A&M. My dad started the string department there, so there we were, where I was born and everything. And so when they would practice, in the practice rooms, I would be under the piano and they would put books under there with me, toys and things like that. So I've always associated reading with, or books with music and a certain setting, and then the joy of having my grandmother read to me in the summers, and then when I wanted to find that key to all this stuff. And when I learned to read, that was it. Off to the races.
Off to the races, yeah. Do you still read a lot?
Oh, yes.
Do you find time to read?
Not as much as I'd like, and so I've become very good at decorating with books. There's a point in your life that you say, okay, I have sections, I have baskets, I have a nice face on this one, it's just living, and I said, I'm living in a treasure chest, and at any moment, I can pick up something. Now, there is also something called biblioholism. There's a book. And you know that you've got it. Have you ever purchased the same book twice? Okay, or magazine. Okay, when you get interested in a subject and you go out and buy a book about it.
Yeah. Right?
So those are the signs.
Are you into police thrillers, or what's your...
Love mysteries. Love mysteries, and I got started, my aunt got me hooked on mysteries, Josephine Tay. Yeah, Josephine Tay, yeah. She's that, and I got hooked on that, and I love, and now I have other authors, the English Cozy Village, in the Cotswolds. I've never been to the Cotswolds, but I know about all that old stuff. And I just lose myself in Agatha Raisin. Oh, that's an Agatha Raisin.
Well, needless to say, you have a good source for books now, right? You don't have to go far to find one, either at home or at work.
At home is really good.
So, when did you say, all right, I want to be a librarian?
Well, now, here's true confession. I'm what's called an accidental librarian. So, I finished undergrad, and I was a history and political science major. Wasn't sure what I wanted to do, and so I going out on job interviews and social work or different things, and wasn't having much success because I hadn't had a real job. And so but I would take the breaks in between interviews at the Central Library, the old Central Library at Chicago Public. I was living there. And one of my recent colleagues that had graduated said, "Hey, are you here for the library jobs?" Well, no. I said, "They're hiring anybody with a bachelor's degree." And you library people know that we still do that library associate. So I went upstairs, and I said, and then the key was when and I said, I'd like children and working with people, a direct lady who was going to school, you're on the ground, you're in a storefront, and you're really helping people. And that turned me around in terms of what I thought the profession of librarianship was. I was introduced to it.
Right. And then graduated up to the parts of the Chicago, main library in Chicago, and then to Baltimore.
Deputy Commissioner / Chief Librarian. That's a very
is that the title?
Chicago title. So I was the Chief Librarian, Deputy Commissioner in Chicago. I went to teach in library school at University of Pittsburgh. And then I returned to public service when one of my students came back to Pittsburgh after he graduated, and he said, I'm going to get in the PhD program. And I said, well, why? You know, you're doing well at this urban library. He said, well, you all taught me all these things about knowledge is power and do all this stuff, and then I got this job, and I went up to the director of the library trying to tell him what I was thinking, and I got brushed off. So maybe I need to come back. And I thought, okay, you put your money where your mouth is in teaching. Go out there and actually do it.
I want to ask you about Baltimore particularly, because we remember not that long ago the Freddie Gray riots in Baltimore. I mean, you were the chief librarian of Baltimore. Did you shut things down?
No. And I was so pleased that the staff members of especially the library that was right at the epicenter, the corner that you saw on television, burning car and everything. We have, and I have to stop saying we, but I'm still a Baltimore citizen, so I have a library there. It's the lifeline for that community. And the night that really the worst of the unrest, the library was untouched, and I talked to the staff about being there and being open the next day. They said yes, and I knew that if I asked them to be there, I had to be there. My only reluctance was telling my mom, who's now living with me, that in the same building, as she wants me to clarify. We're not. She's an old social worker. When she left music, she went to social, all of this. So I waited until like 15 minutes before I was leaving out. Still, no matter how old you are, 15 minutes before to say, well, I'm going down there, I'm going to be there when they open. And I was waiting for it, and she just said, remember to take some cups and some water. And by that Thursday, she was down there with us at the information desk, giving kind of directions, passing out food.
And were people coming to the library?
They were there. They were there that morning waiting to get in to use the computers to apply for jobs. A young man was just so appreciative that we opened, and he came back a few days later and said he had 3 job interviews. So that library in that corner, and it wasn't touched during the unrest, with everything on it. It had 2-story pane glass, beautiful windows. And there was one night, so that's the power of a library.
That does speak to the importance of the library in
communities.
And particularly, now Chicago, Baltimore, a couple years ago, Carol and I went to the new library, local library in Anacostia. But the importance, it's a beautiful, beautiful building. The importance of the library, it has proved to be very important, particularly in the minority communities, hasn't it?
And also in rural areas, people don't think about that, but in many areas that are isolated, the library is the community center. It's the place that people go to. It's where they get their computer access and that. So it's a lifeline in many communities.
Before we get to our neighborhood, the Library of Congress, you also served for some time
at the time, and this was right after 9/11 and 2002, 2003, and there was such concern, and rightfully so, about national security. And what the library community was concerned about was a provision in the Patriot Act, and I still remember Section 215, that allowed for the government, basically. We were called feisty fighters for freedom. And that's why I smiled when you brought it up, because you may know librarians aren't usually seen as feisty, much less fighters. But that very stereotype of the librarian as someone that's not in it for money, obviously, or anything, that stereotype worked for us with the public, because they said if librarians are concerned, maybe there is something to look at.
Did you fix it? Does that
Right
provision
now,
still
and the
apply?
provision has been modified, and the American Library Association is very pleased because there's some balance. And that's all we were saying, that just make sure that you protect the person's right to know if they want to know something.
So we are all proud neighbors of the Library of
Oh.
Congress, right down the street here, all three buildings. What do you see now as library? What's the main purpose of the Library of Congress? Is it just serve the members of Congress?
Well, and I'm glad you said serve, because of course it was founded to the Library of Congress, and Thomas Jefferson even said there's no subject, basically, that a member of Congress should not have access to know about. So he founded to help them in their deliberations, and over time it grew into and through the copyright deposit program, a national library that's now the largest library in the world. And I'm getting used to, in being at the Library of Congress, superlatives, the largest, the biggest, this and that. I mean, it's the largest collection of comic books, this, you name it, okay? So it's expanded.
The largest in the world. British Library, whatever, this is it.
And my friend, Mr. Keating, he's watching Facebook Live next week, yes. Now there is a new gang in town. I know Washington is a gang of this, gang of this, the gang of three now. Library of Congress, the National Archives, David Ferrier,
Yes.
and Mr. Sporkin at the Smithsonian. So we are now that. So the Library of Congress has grown into a service, and there's still a special service. We call the Special Forces, the Congressional Research Service. So that's really a force of researchers and librarians that serve Congress and staff. That's an important function. The library manages the creative process and the copyright process, and then it has this wonderful collection of materials, the national treasure, 162 million items.
Whoa. Are you talking books now, or?
Well, 38 million books
Oh.
and other materials, prints and photographs. Almost, you can't imagine just about all of the things that the library
Now,
and new discoveries every day.
I want to ask you about that too.
Yeah.
But it can't all be located down here.
Well, there are three buildings. You mentioned the three buildings: the Jefferson Building, the first building in Washington D.C. to have electricity. In 1897, when it opened, and they keep reminding me of this: on budget and on time. So former staff members, under budget. See, staff, they know, under budget and on time. And so when you go into the building and see some of the light fixtures, the bulbs are exposed because they were so proud of that.
Yeah.
The Adams Building opened next in the 1930s or so. Okay, I'm looking, I'm getting some nods, still getting all my stats together. And then the Madison Building in 1980, and the Madison Building, named for James Madison, is the only memorial to that president, the fourth president. And so there's a statue, and we do that. And then there is a wonderful facility for motion pictures and recordings in Culpeper, Virginia, the Packard Center, that is preserving wonderful, doing so much with that. And then there are storage facilities, Fort Meade, Cabin Branch, and that, so.
Yeah, that's what I figured. There must be some of those.
Oh, yeah.
Right. So, to what extent is the library, by the way, in terms of superlatives, I'd have to add, the most beautiful building in Washington.
I've heard that, Jeff said, so you said it. It is the most beautiful building, I think, and to see the inscriptions about knowledge and books and all of that. It just is that real temple to knowledge and information.
So to what extent is it open to the public?
It's entirely open to the public, and we have been called like one of the best kept secrets, and we don't want to be, because I don't think that as many people realize that they can get a reader's card if they're 16, that they can walk into the building and can get tours, they can view things. And so one of my major really push that I'm doing is to expand and enhance the visitor experience and to do more to let people know about what we have and programming too. So there's more programming that's coming.
So they can come, people can walk in for a tour, which we've done several times, but can you go down and work there?
Yes, with the reader's card. Yes, there are several reading
research
rooms and everything. So, and that's something we want people to realize. There's a young reader center, and we're going to be expanding that and really making that more youth-friendly, because they are, as you can imagine with Hamilton and some of the things, there's a renewed interest, as one kid told me, in cool dudes from history. So well, there are a few.
Yeah.
And there's some women.
Yeah. So you mentioned special collections, special treasures. I know what do you call it? The attic of the Library of Congress, and new discoveries. A little bit about what's your latest new discovery?
When I was sworn in, right after I walked off the stage, I started tweeting. Yes, the Library of Congress. Tweeting, because I said, I thought I knew a lot about the Library of Congress, I'm a librarian, but there's so much to discover, and I'm inviting you as I discover to do it. So every day, just about, I'm putting up something that I'm seeing. And to see the contents of Abraham Lincoln's pockets on the night he was assassinated. To look at his draft of the Gettysburg Address that might have been the one that he actually used, to look at the draft of the Declaration of Independence in Jefferson's hand, with annotations by Franklin and that. And just yesterday, and it made me feel so proud, because the deputy librarian has been there 40 years, so, you know,
he doesn't know everything. Right?
Well, a curator came up and he called me and said, Carla, you have to come in. There's a new discovery. In the prints and photographs department, found and had been working on a box of photographs or contact sheets from a very famous photographer that had been commissioned by the Social Security Administration to take documentary photographs of people who were receiving Social Security, to put a face on the policy. And there were the marks on a contact sheet. This famous photographer had said, this is the one on that. And then the curator said, oh, and by the way, we have 3,500 of the negatives. And what? And no one really knew that existed. So there are discoveries that are being made, and there are things to be put up online so that people can know.
And you can't name him or her?
See, you tried to trick me.
Oh, I know.
I told him beforehand about this discoveries. But let's just say it
very
will
well-known
be,
photographer.
Can I say what? Yeah, it's a very well-known photographer. And the government had commissioned quite a few. Dorothea Lange, and the library has her contact sheets and things like that, to put these faces on what they were trying to show. And so the library has that. The library has the writing desk and chair of Rachmaninoff, given by his daughters. And as the daughter of musicians, you know, okay, yeah, that's something. And then it boggles the mind sometimes about what the library has, and what we want to do is share this and put it in, use the tools of today to connect people with these wonderful things. Primary sources from history.
What about digitizing?
That's what.
Yeah. Is that a goal to?
Oh, that's a wonderful goal. The Library of Congress has the papers of 23 presidents. You know, most of the presidents after FDR have presidential libraries associated with the National Archives. But from George Washington up to Coolidge, the library has their papers.
You have all their papers, yeah.
They're pretty much, yes. So there are 12 presidents, so most are online, George Washington, but there are 12 presidents whose papers aren't online yet. And I want to get those online really fast, because you will not guess two of the presidents who aren't online. Teddy Roosevelt.
Whoa.
And Woodrow Wilson.
Yeah.
Wow. Teddy Roosevelt, his diary that he kept in his pocket, that when you open it, when he was about 27 or 26, you open it to the date, February 14th, that was the day you put an X on it. My life has ended as I know it, something like that, because that's the day his mother died and his wife on the same day. Okay, and there it is, and you're looking at it in his hand. So being able to scan that, being able to put that up, so that people, wherever they are, can have access to it.
So is one of your goals, or is it a project to digitize everything in the library?
Well, not everything, because I mentioned those books.
Yeah.
The most important things to put up are the unique things. Some of the books, for instance, are held in college and university libraries and things. They're not unique. These items that the Library of Congress has that are unique are the things that should be the priority, because literally no one else has them. These are, it went down, and it's just so much fun, because I say that I have whiplash sometimes, right? So I'm standing there and I'm looking at the papers of Clara Barton, and then I turn over here and there's the papers of I Am Peggy. So there's 100. And then I go, and there are the baseball season, the papers in 8 boxes, but they're the scouting reports and things of Branch Rickey. His assessment of Ernie Banks. His assessment of Hank Aaron. Maybe you should hire him. Sandy Kovacs. Don Drugs. I mean, you just go through, and here they are. They haven't been put up. They haven't been that. So wouldn't that be kind of cool?
Oh, yeah, right. How has the internet changed libraries?
Oh, it's had an enormous effect, as you can imagine, because and we even have T-shirts, librarians, the original search engines. we were part of the early things of databases in the 60s and things and all that. It has made it possible for people to get information, to share information, and to it's just in time, not just in case. And when it was all print, you had to have extra copies or have things and protect them, because just in case somebody has. And now it's more sharing just in time.
Right. We'll leave time for your questions.
Oh,
but
sure.
I must ask you, that leads to the question about the future of libraries. You mentioned search engines. Look what Wikipedia has done for, how many people buy an encyclopedia anymore for their home? I just finished a wonderful little book I'd recommend called Word by Word. A woman by the name of Corey Stamford, who is a lexicographer, who works for Merriam-Webster. How many dictionaries still exist anymore? How many people actually buy them, right? Rather than just going online. So what does that mean about the future of libraries? Will there be a day when there are no physical libraries?
And that's something that the library profession has been working with, and I mentioned the library in Baltimore, where the space, the physical space, will probably be redesigned, and a lot of libraries are doing that now, where you have more programming, where you have access to computers. There's one library in New Mexico, I believe, that's all like an Apple store. And that you are going to have a different type of activity. We're finding, though, that people are still wanting to be around people. And even if they're all sitting in the, you know, they're sitting in coffee shops and things, even if they're all on the
on their laptop
computers and stuff like that, they're there. And they still want that interaction with other people. And so libraries are looking at library as place, that third place, part of that, and outside of home and work and school, third place. And so that's what you'll start seeing in the future. And a lot of libraries and communities, when you look at new designs, are incorporating more gathering spaces, more cafes in the library.
Right. So when people look back at your tenure as a Librarian of Congress, what are the changes that you'd like people to remember that you've made, and what impact would you like to leave on the library?
Well, I know they're going to mention the disco night that's coming up. On the 6th. That is going to be quite something.
In the Jefferson Building?
In the Jefferson Building, Gloria Gaynor, I Will Survive. Her recording was put on the National Register each year. 25 films and 25 recordings are put up, or even a baseball game this year. So they'll think about more access to the library through technology and being able to have access to the library in all types of formats and download things and just interact with live streaming programming from the library out into communities. They're going to think about the 18-wheelers. There are 3 18-wheelers going into communities, pulling up live in the library, and here's the library in your community. So I think that what people will hopefully say is that she made the Library of Congress really America's library, and they all feel that ownership. It's a wonderful thing for a country to have.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And we're so lucky to have you there.
Thank
you. This gentleman has the microphone for a question for Dr. Hayden, and follow it around. Yeah.
30 years ago, when I came here to Washington, I was researching something at the Library of Congress. It was Victorian mourning hairwork. It had to do with braiding structure. So I went to the Library of Congress, and I had librarians crawling all over me. They were so excited about this really strange, weird topic. Is that still the case? Are you understaffed? I mean,
Of course. And the staffing, and when I mentioned the 80,000 years of experience and people who have worked with the materials and the collections, they have a knowledge base that we are really working to preserve and to look at. Because when some of those staff members, the potential is when they walk out the door, valuable knowledge walks out with them, because there are all these things and you have to work with the materials. And so yes, there's that excitement, an interesting question that really challenges the librarians to find the sources. Remember, there are a lot of librarians that are on Jeopardy. We love that. I mean, that's the kind of thing. And a lot of libraries are putting those called query files. And you get an unusual question that you record the answer so that the next person that comes in and asks about Victoria braiding, they can get to it. But, so we need more staff. Yeah.
We're not going to ask why you had an interest in Victorian braiding.
See, that's the librarian's credo. We only ask you enough to help you get the answer. Though there are times we really want to know. But we can't, because we're not supposed to care. And that kind of gets us in trouble sometimes. People are saying, well, you need to know. We don't ask you, why do you want to do this, and what might be
Yeah.
As as a former public librarian, I'd like to ask you, what is the Library of Congress doing as outreach to public libraries around the country?
Oh, I'm glad, and I mentioned the live streaming, for instance. The Young Reader Center at the Jefferson Building, for instance, has wonderful authors that are there. So we are now able to, we had Justice Ginsburg, we've had Corky Roberts, we've had Meg Medina, and we are able to connect with public libraries and have live streaming and interaction with public libraries and school libraries as well. With the program, we're going to expand that. We also have a surplus books program that we work with legislators to actually make sure that libraries have access to additional books, and we'll be doing more with traveling exhibits. And that those 18-wheelers too will be coming in. So we want to do much more outreach in the program for public libraries. So that's dear to my heart.
Dr. Hayden, one of the great things about the Library of Congress is the docent program that's there. I've been a docent there for 13 years, and until my recent struggles with neuropathy, it's tough going up and down those 3 flights of marble stairs. But the one thing that I would always tell the people who came to visit when I was getting ready to lead them off was, I said, this place is filled with a lot of treasures, but the best treasures in the Library of Congress are the librarians.
Right.
Room after room. I was one of those cheaters with my groups. If it was a little group, we would go visit the main library. We'd go in and visit with Abby, and she was always willing to spend a few minutes with them. I discovered the rare books room for children. Basically, it's not for children; it's for children's authors. And they didn't get a lot of visitors, so she always was glad when I popped in. The woman who was in charge of congressional research in the Jefferson Reading Room was just wonderful. If you ever get a chance to visit the Jefferson Reading Room, you'll find the ceiling filled with angels in that room. That room originally was the Senate Reading Room, and nobody needed angels more than the Senate, especially in today's world. So I have to tell you that they're your really great treasures. As you come to know them, I think you'll appreciate them more and more. They're just really wonderful.
I do, and every day, I'm so glad you said that. I mentioned the young lady that came and brought the materials yesterday, and every time I get an opportunity to be with one of the librarians or take her, stand there when they're giving the tour, and the docents, they're the two. Whenever that happens, I say, and they've said publicly that all of these wonderful things, 162 million items, they're wonderful, but they really don't come alive and mean anything without the people. It's just a mausoleum if you don't have the people, and they make it. They're it.
Question here?
So, your short tenure has not been without controversy, and I'm referring in particular to the Copyright Office, which is a very important component of the library. And Congress seems hell-bent on passing legislation that would transfer your authority to appoint the head of the Copyright Office, the so-called register, to the president. I'm interested in, and that was provoked by your decision to relieve her of her responsibility very early in your tenure. So I'm interested in why you think...
I am in Washington.
I'm interested in why you think the legislation is not a good idea, but I'm even more interested in what you were thinking when you relieved her of her responsibility.
I can understand your interest. I don't know your background or anything, because the copyright process, as I mentioned, has allowed the library in 1870, when the Library of Congress became the basic guardian of the copyright process, and it has allowed the deposit requirement in the copyright law has allowed the library to select from all the materials in the registry. During my process of thinking about being the Librarian of Congress, I became very aware of not only the importance of the copyright process in the office, but also some of the concerns and issues. And I continue to be, as it is part of my responsibility to modernize the office and to work on that.
Do you think it should belong and continue
I
to stay in the library?
have no opinion about that, and that's something that Congress decides. My responsibility is to make sure it's modern and efficient, and I've met with so many groups and worked on that, so.
Well, it's there to make it work. Yes? Right.
Hi, I falsely raised my hand when you asked who had been who was employed by the Library of Congress, because I, like a gentleman across the room, have been a long-time docent in the Library of Congress, and want to thank you for coming here tonight, and Bill for another one of your wonderful. I am permitted to have the pure joy of introducing people from all over the country and other nations around the world, just to how wonderful the Library of Congress is, what a true treasure it is. I start by reminding them that this is not the Library of Congress. That the Library of Congress is in fact a bunch of maps and law books that came down from Philadelphia in 1800, and that it has grown from there, and the wonderful history. One minor thing, there's so many things I'd like to ask you about, but one minor thing is that I believe that there was a time when the young people were allowed in the library, under 16, that were they were allowed in the, and I'm not certain about this, I'm not asking you to do anything about this, but I keep thinking, how wonderful would it be if you grew up in the Library of Congress, if you came here after school, and I realize all kinds of discipline and kids, whatever, being kids, that sort of thing, but it just does seem like sort of a shame that local Washington kids can't just kind of.
Well, they can though.
Well, in the one room, so what you have.
Oh, no, they can come in, and there's a special area, the Young Reader Center, and they even have a story time on Friday mornings, and people come. And we just opened that on Saturday, so a lot of kids are coming in with their caregivers or that, and we have school groups that are coming from the areas and as well. So in fact, you're gonna see more, and my real hope is to have a dedicated area for young readers under 16, so that they can have a learning lab and some other things too, so they can make history and learn history. So that's a major focus. So thank you for that. I didn't tell her that.
Yes, ma'am.
Hi there. I have a question. It's just real general. I don't have a background. I'm not working down there at the library or anything, but I'm just curious, like archives, so much of future depends on what we collected in the past. And so I'm curious how the focus now, and who sets it? Do you set it, or the goals of acquisitions that come into the Library of Congress, and how to tailor that and to try to get a good cross-section?
The Library of Congress is very much like any other library with a collection. We call it a collection management department. They have selectors, they have people who make those decisions. So luckily, whoever's ahead of the library doesn't have to do that. And so you have experts in different fields, curators and librarians. Yes, there's a policy, and they revive it, and they say, this is what we're gonna collect, this is the focus. They look at what other libraries are doing, and they coordinate. So there's a whole department in the Library of Congress, as in most university libraries and public libraries, that deals with that. Collections development policies, that's getting in the weeds and too librarianish, but there are people who are trying to, and it's an interesting thing because you're trying to see what people might need in the future that you can't see, and what might be significant now. So that's what having people with the expertise, people that are involved in this. So this material is important, could be important to a future researcher or person who would be interested in the subject. Yeah, that's the fun, that's actually the fun part.
I was always under the impression that you have a copy of every single book printed in the United States, published in the United States.
No, I made that mistake one time. But no, the librarians and the selectors select. So even with the deposit requirement for copyright registration, there's about maybe 20,000 items that come in every working day. The library selects about 12 to 13,000 of those items to put into the collection. Everything that comes in might not be suitable for the collection.
So publishers are not required to provide a copy of every single book they publish.
If they register for copyright.
Register for copyright, but the book itself does not necessarily become part
They
of the
have
library.
to, no, that's right.
Yeah.
So then the selectors are able to, and that's what's allowed the library to grow and become that national collection and that national library. That part in the copyright law that requires those two things.
And do you have a catalog where, I mean, could I go
Yes.
online and see every book that you have in the library?
Quite a few, and also, and just, this is a shameless plug, we just published a book called The Card Catalog. And it is a nostalgic, it is a wonderful gift item, and you have a copy! The Card Catalog, it just came out, and it talks about the history of the card catalog, because there's such nostalgia about the card catalog.
Nicholson Baker, do you know?
Oh, I know Mr. Baker.
No, Nicholson Baker, this was his
Wax
passion
poetic.
of saving the
Thank
card
you.
catalog
I
from
will
San
send him a
Francisco.
copy.
Yeah, I mean, he bought the card catalog
I know.
when San Francisco Library was
It's
throwing theirs
wonderful.
away. I think he actually went to the dump and got it.
Well, people should not worry, the Library of Congress has almost a full city block of the cards. And this was so fun. A young gentleman, who's about 26, came to do a story on the book, right? And he said, "Oh, ma'am, I have to tell you, I never used a card catalog." So we took him down there, and he was just fascinated. Wow. And they said, "Well, what are you doing?" We said, "Well, you look." It was something. So, yes, most of the things are on there, but he was just fascinated. That's that book, Revenge of Analog, too, just the book David Saxon. There's a whole chapter on some nostalgia and how things are coming back.
This time, we're here.
Oh, National Library, this is National Library Week.
Oh, there.
Oh, I think that's why I'm here tonight.
That's any excuse for
Connect
it.
the dots.
Yeah.
First, I'd like to say congratulations, and I have to make sure I tell my mom about you. She'll be like, "Oh, that's so
Is she a
nice."
librarian?
No, but she loves books, and we grew up with books, and I went to the library with my daughter and my granddaughter and all of us. But my question is kind of general. A lot of conflicts historically. A lot of times, the first thing that you'll see is book burning. And so I just wanted to ask you, what do books represent that are threatening? And then how is the Library of Congress protected? I'm just curious.
Well, and this is another person that I didn't ask to bring this up, because I'm very passionate about the fact that books have been vehicles of, they're windows to the world. They've been this wonderful vehicle for so many years. And there's a book, The History of Reading by Alberto Manuel, and it talks about the fact that if you didn't have print, you didn't need glasses, all that. But the one chapter is called, that really puts it together, is called Forbidden Reading. And the picture that's there, the photograph, is a rare photograph of a slave outside of the cabin with a book. And he talks about the fact that as centuries, I can almost quote it, as centuries of slave owners, dictators, tyrants, and other illicit holders of power have known, and the literate crowd is the easiest to rule. And if you cannot prevent people from learning to read, the next best recourse is to limit its scope. And then he talks about book burning and all attempts to do, because as Frederick Douglass said, he knew when his slave owner didn't want him to read that something was in this thing. It was powerful. And there's a wonderful connection between literacy and that's what was so powerful at my swearing in. And when they said, oh, you're the first woman, and that's, the female-dominated profession. Yes, that is something. 85% of the profession is female. So, yeah, that was something. There was a lot of joy in Mudville. Female librarians, I have to say. But the thing that really got me was that, and I thought about for my remarks, just the significance of a person from a race that had been denied the right to read and punished. And I actually, my colleague, I said, I want to get all the laws that were in effect about slaves, and the people taught them to read, and amputation, and whipping, and one was 40 lashes, and all that. I wanted to say that at my swearing in, and I said, this could be a down. I don't know if I, in terms of the significance, but I was able to say that that's what something, because books and what's in the books that was the key, because once you get that, you have access to everything that makes you think. And African Americans in particular, there was that thing of legally preventing it, and then also the tying with religion. So there was the thought of, teach slaves to read so they could read the Bible and be happy that maybe, things were bad here, but maybe they'll go to heaven. So, that. Well, then they found out that there's some stuff in that Bible. That let my people go thing. Maybe we better restrict that. Maybe we better read to them. So there's a book about that when I can read my title clear about slavery and literacy. And it's also tied into, and I just have to, because this is really something, when you think about literacy and things like that, think of a plantation, an older slave sees a young slave being taught to read or doing something illicit like that, and the natural instinct of an older person is protected. Don't do that. Don't read. Reading is dangerous. You get caught reading, you can do that. And this thread of reading and literacy and danger is something when we look at that. So, thank you. Because that's a soapbox. If I have one, but it is something when you think about literacy.
Very good, yes.
Thank you so much for coming. I'll see you at disco night, by the way.
Oh my goodness, it's so free,
had to log on at
1 minute.
Sure. Yeah. So as the first librarian of Congress, how do you think you approach your job differently?
In 60 years. Well,
so what do you think specifically is different about the way you approach your job than some of your?
The 13 librarians of Congress, there have been lawyers, there have been clerks of the Senate, speech writers, historians, and so at each time, two other poet. Archibald, Lawrence, at each point, and the wonderful book about the library that tells it through these tenures of the librarians is America's Library. And it was done for the centennial. And so I think at this point, because the two other librarians were at kind of spurt growth periods or different things in the library's history, one was the head of the Cleveland Public Library, and one was the head of the Boston Public Library, to my predecessor. So at this time, with the outreach and the public emphasis. I think that's something that I'm bringing to this part of the library system.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you very much for the energy and the fun that you bring to the Reader Center.
Librarians are
your job
fun.
generally. What is the biggest surprise you found, not in specific items in the collection, but in the functions of the library and the way you spend your day? The biggest surprise you discovered in your 6 months?
The biggest surprise is how many more discoveries there are. And that is exciting. And the staff members are excited. Some of them are overwhelmed because they're backlogged, and you go into a room and there are people going through these boxes of manuscript collections that are, still coming in, and you have to take the time. So that has been, I think, the biggest surprise, but also the biggest source of excitement. What else is in here? What else can we bring up? What else can we, when you stand next to a curator, and the depth of knowledge of the curators, that's also that. A curator that can say, you just put the Sigmund Freud papers up, and that sure was interesting, and he corresponded with Albert Einstein. A whiplash moment. What? Sigmund Freud? Albert Einstein? What did they say? What? What are you talking about? That's the kind of thing that's the biggest surprise, that they're all these gems. It's just like pearls coming out of the mouths of these curators.
Yeah. How exciting every day.
Every day.
Discoveries like
You
that.
never know.
Hi. So one, this is just a shout out from Baltimore. I grew up and I still live in Baltimore. And something very important, this is just a statement. So it's a statement of appreciation. When the riots happened, I lived not in that area, but I did go to school in that area. One of the things that people don't know is everybody had to go to work, but the schools then became closed when the riots happened. And one of the things that Dr. Hayden did, for a lot of us, we believe that she saved lives. So I want people to know that, because what parents were able to say was that the library was going to be open, and the children then were sent to the library to stay. That library specifically that you're talking about in your mind, Donna, was the library that I used to go to in the 1970s. I don't know how long you've been in Baltimore. And one of the reasons that you have a fan base, and you have a fan base in French. And one of the reasons for me was that one of those librarians, I had a reading issue, and yesterday I found you and Jean Yang talking about that, and you talk. You're a good troll, and you're subversive. Love that. And you all were talking about reading, and you all were enticing. And so one of the people who helped me learn to read and improve my vocabulary and gave me the power of language was a librarian at that library. Thank you very much.
Thank you. That's the essence of it, and it's those librarians working with and recognizing and bringing out those talents and helping and being there for people. We hear those stories so many times. So thank you for bringing that. That's the essence of it, from the braided hair to a young child that needed that special attention. That's what librarians do. Yeah.
Great conversation. We just have time for a couple more questions. One here and one over here. Yes, hi.
Okay, you mentioned the budget hearings. What kind of things does the congressman find interesting about the library?
What I think you will be very heartened to know is that there's a real appreciation for the work of the Library of Congress and libraries in general, and that has come through. And so with the upcoming budget hearings, and they haven't been scheduled yet, or we're working on that, we'll be, from the library, presenting more plans to be able to digitize collections, modernizing and continuing to modernize the copyright process that needs to be brought up to date, and those types of improvements that will really help get the library going and continuing to go. So that's what the types of things that you'll hear at the budget hearing.
So far, at least, you're saying the library has not become the center of a partisan battle, right? There's bipartisan support for the work of the library?
Oh, yes. Oh, and it's wonderful because there's always a connection to a state or something that everybody, they can all relate. And there are a lot of legislators who have librarians in their family.
At one time, the President of the United States.
Oh, Mrs. Bush, well, the two Mrs. Bushes. Barbara Bush was one of the first and worked so hard with literacy and was just a champion. And then Laura Bush with the National Book Festival that gets now 200,000 people a year. And she's still active in making sure that there are scholarships for librarians. People want to be the Laura Bush program for that. So we've had one real librarian and one person that was very committed to literacy.
Question in the back here. Yes.
Dr. Hayden, I'd like to introduce to you Dr. Sean Nelson Schmidt, a product of the Puyallup Indian Reservation and a definite product of the Swan Creek Library. Without the library, there would be no Dr. Sean Nelson Schmidt.
Thank you for bringing that up.
Yes, I just wanted to say I've been an ardent follower of your career since you were in Baltimore. And as my lovely husband just said, I grew up on a reservation in Washington State, and I'm the first in my family to graduate from high school, first to go to college, and first to complete a PhD. And it is it's entirely because of the public library in my neighborhood. Unfortunately, since I went to college, funding elapsed and the actual library had to close. So it is my goal one day to reopen that library back on the reservation and name it in honor of my mother, who was a single mother and a deaf woman who had very little access to education herself. And as a result, libraries have been my passion. As you can see with my...
Oh, look at your shirt!
Yes, my various stamps on my shirt, and my Library of Congress tote bag.
Do you have a store?
Yes,
books, bags,
this and a variety of other goods available.
Online.
Yes, and most notably, I suppose, or most recently, in as far as libraries have played a significant role in my life. My now husband proposed to me in the New York Public Library.
Are you a fan of, this is live streaming, I have a friendly rivalry with Tony Marks,
Oh, is he
the
the...
head of the New York Public, so any kind of anniversary, think of the library coming.
So anyway, I just wanted to say thank you so much, and such an inspiration to me.
Thank you.
I think that's a great note to end on. And what a great conversation tonight about the importance of reading and about books and about libraries in general and about the great Library of Congress and how fortunate we are to have the right person in the right place at the right time.
Yes,
Thank you. May 15th, Christine Brennan, another history maker. Kind of the first female sports columnist will be here. USA Today, you see her all over the place, Christine Brennan. So we'll see you then.
Yeah.